Welcome back. It's exactly 15 minutes to the top of the hour of 8 o'clock. I'm glad you're still with us. If you're just joining us, welcome on board. It's the Kickstarter segment of Morning at NTV, and we shall be discussing the Non-Aligned Movement Summit. That is the summit that is coming up in January 2024, as well as the G77 summit that is also coming up next year. The relevance of non-alignment movement and the path to sustainable development for Uganda as a country. I have eminent persons who will be helping us understand what it means for Uganda and why exactly should a country be non-aligned when, well, some could say there is need for alignment. Let me first give you a preamble. Trade and geopolitics are deeply interdependent, driven by nations' shared economic interests in the global political landscape. As these common interests grow stronger, the root of their relationships deepens accordingly. This intricate relationship serves as a vital thread that weaves together economic interests, resource accessibility, trade route control, regional integration, and the pursuit of geopolitical goals. As we continue to explore the lessons exchanged between Uganda and the rest of the global south, it becomes evident that partnerships transcend geographical boundaries. At the launch of the media activities ahead of the Non-Aligned Movement Summit, the organizing committee spoke of the need for Ugandans to be on board when it comes to supporting this particular set of events, how they are going to be iconic, and what they do present for the various stakeholders, including the business persons in the small and medium enterprise space. I have with me the Executive Director at the Federation for Small and Medium Enterprises, Mr. John Walugembe. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chris, for asking me to join you this morning.
We shall be getting that perspective from Mr. Walugembe. We are also honored to be joined by Ambassador James Mugume, a seasoned diplomat.
Thank you.
Many
Thank
thanks
you very
for
much.
joining us.
Glad to be here.
And I want to begin with the seasoned diplomat, because the Non-Aligned Movement Summit pretty much plays into the diplomatic space and the end game that is when countries begin to look at where to stand and how to pursue their own interests. Before we come to the summit proper, just give us a background of what the non-aligned movement is, because as we were having a conversation earlier before we came on air, you specifically stated that Uganda is a product of non-alignment. What did you mean?
What I meant is that the history of the non-aligned movement dates back to the Bandung Conference in 1955. That's when a few countries got together. We had president of Yugoslavia, Prime Minister of India, the president of Tito of Yugoslavia, and the Africans who were there was President Nkrumah, even before Ghana became independent. And the idea was to establish a third force for independence of the then colonized countries. So NAM were countries that were colonized, and then came together in 1961 to establish NAM, the non-aligned movement. And in 1964, the G77 was established again to bring together countries of the South and on ensuring their right to development. So the G77 deals with economic and trade issues. And so what I was saying is that after 1955, when Nkrumah was the only one who attended the Bandung Conference. So
from Africa.
From Africa. So you can see after that, our independence, our sovereignty on the principles of Bandung gave to the birth of countries like Uganda. So we are a product of the non-aligned countries because we established, the new movement established independent states with their sovereign treaty. And then established the G77 to look after the economic interests of the developing countries. So all of us as a developing country, we are a product of that leadership, of the Prime Minister of India, Yugoslavia, Nasser of Egypt, and the President of Yugoslavia at Bandung.
At Bandung Conference.
In 1955.
Okay, there is a narrative that either needs to be debunked or simply clarified. The notion that the countries that form the non-aligned movement are basically those that have sought not to be seen to side with the global powers in the diplomatic endgames that either Russia, United States, and increasingly, or over the last 30 years, China have come to play. How did it transition from its impetus in 1950s to be the Cold War proxy arrangement that saw countries not want to be seen to either support Russia or United States in what came to be known as the Cold War?
No, you see, the non-aligned countries sought to protect the interest of the developing countries. The superpowers, the history came from the colonial history, where countries, where the few European countries were dominating, and after the Second World War, Europe became a superpower. Now, the Soviet Union was the other superpower, and once we came into nuclear, there was a nuclear threat. And so the developing countries, it was for us, for the developing, they had to have a unified stand in order to protect their sovereignty. That's one. Independence, their sovereignty. Two, in order to protect their economies from being exploited on the right to development. So they set up the G7 to ensure that the countries enjoy the natural resources of their nations. So the question of being non-aligned is not that you are not neither here nor there. The idea of non-alignment is to protect the interest, to form the unit. Now, the non-aligned has two components. One is how to interact with the global north. The other one, the other one is how to strengthen our force as the third world countries, and in the process be able to gain a voice in how the world is governed. And
within the context of bargaining.
Bargaining is about power.
It's about power,
If you don't have power, you're not going to bargain. So the developing countries, and if you've noticed, is that since then, the developing countries coming together, they have transitioned. Trade between Africa and Asia has increased more than between Africa and Europe. And so that strength now, that means the developed countries have to take us more seriously because of our economic strength, because of the natural resources we have. Otherwise, if we don't cooperate, the developed countries will just pick one after another.
Thank you very much, Ambassador James Mugume, for that preamble. It offers us a very good background and foundation upon which to continue with this discussion. And that's where I want James Walugembe, from the perspective of business and trade. The non-aligned movement has the world's most not most, but very industrialized countries. When I speak about the fact that we are dealing with the Sri Lankas, India, Brazil, South Africa, these are industrialized by any measure, and we know all the opportunities that come through. But within the trade imperative, what does NAM represent now?
For Uganda?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much. So we expect, as part of NAM, to have at least 3,000 delegates come and attend the conference, and about 100 heads of state. So that means that this will have a knock-on effect on the economy, a positive one. Of course, we're already seeing a lot of infrastructure development. So this infrastructure will remain and will continue to catalyze the urban economy. We're also going to see these people are not just coming to attend the NAM, but they are going to visit different tourist attractions. So it means that they are helping this country to be able to boost its tourism sector. But also these people are bringing the much needed foreign exchange. As a country, we need that, so that will definitely be helpful. But then as we do all these things, as we prepare, as we make roads, as people improve their facilities and so on, you're going to see that a number of jobs are going to be created and a number of skills are going to be learned. Because remember, as a country, we've not been doing very well in hosting these conferences. This industry, which we call MICE, meetings, incentives, conferences and events, is huge.
Repeat that.
MICE, it's called the MICE industry.
MICE industry.
Meetings, incentives, conferences and events.
Right.
Some countries now, like Rwanda, are positioning themselves very strategically to ensure that their economy is driven by these because this basically tends to drive the tourism sector. So Uganda, what we've been lacking in Uganda are a number of supportive infrastructure. We've not been having a big convention center for such big events. UDC has partnered with Speak Resort Munyonyo to build that. I think they're building a facility that will be able to host about 5,250 people. So I think that's a good starting point. I also heard that along the way, UDC intends to build another convention center on the Nile. You know, so if we can invest in this, then it can help boost our, not only boost the tourism industry, but also boost the image of the country and the confidence. Because when people come for this conference, it's not the last time that they're coming. They'll come back as foreign investors, they'll come back as business partners. So it's a positive, overall, it's a positive thing.
Now, allow me ask you a very specific question that should be able to offer us the kind of context for the average Chris Higenyi to understand what exactly is in it for us. When Uganda hosted the iconic CHOGM in 2007, the same aspirations and hopes were expressed about the fact that a foreign exchange would be gotten and that investments would do the trickle-down effects. But we saw, or rather, after that iconic conference in 2007, we pretty much continue to grapple with the same issues that the country was grappling with. So if you don't mind, what are the numbers, for example, when it comes to how much the economy that is MICE is going to benefit? Have we sat down with the organizing committee and government for that matter, and we have a set of service providers who will be coming from the private sector, specifically the small and medium enterprises? So
I think, so part of the problem that we have as a country is that sometimes we tend to focus on either minors, but sometimes negative things that, you know, if you look at CHOGM, I mean, hasn't evolved. But you found that the newspaper said to concentrate on cars, who supplied cars, and we forgot the bigger picture of the knock-on effect on the border economy. Instead of doing an analysis to say how many visitors did we receive, how much money did they bring, how many jobs were created, we concentrated and so supplied too much. So we minimize, we minimize the impact of these things. So I'm not saying that those things were done perfectly or there are no negative points to them, but my point is, as Ugandans, really, there are times when we need to come together and say, you know what, this is for all of us. Let's pull our weight together. Let's make sure that this works. Internally, we can have minor disagreements, but we shouldn't minimize, because now, like NAM and G77+, these are huge events, you know, that we are hosting, that other countries would have loved to host. If you look at the countries that have hosted before, South Africa, Egypt, Algeria, these are big nations. So the fact that we've been given an opportunity is great for our country. Of course, my only concern, and that really goes towards the preparation side. I think like KCC has adopted a methodology of basically cleaning out all small business owners, and we want to create a good image, and that's completely understandable. But these people that are coming, also coming from developing countries, what is here is also in their
what
countries.
they see in their countries.
So trying to, you know, push off, I don't know, 20 to 30,000 businesses to make the place clean, you're basically shooting yourself in the foot, because as these people move, they also want to spend. If the place is too clean, then you reduce the spending opportunities.
Okay.
You see?
Yeah.
So what for me, I would have wanted some kind of middle way. You know, how can we organize these small businesses and say, okay, you're disorganized, let's put you into workspaces, you're a hawker, no, for this period, please don't work, and so on, instead of just pushing out everyone en masse.
Interesting.
But I think
yeah.
apart from the business, I mean the benefits from the delegates that will come.
Yeah.
You see, after the conference, after delegates have gone home, Uganda takes over as chair of NAM for 3 years.
That's right.
And the responsibility is huge. The benefits, apart from negotiating on behalf of the non-aligned countries with the global north, there is what they call South-South cooperation.
South cooperation. Yeah.
Now, that cooperation has 3 levels, 3 tier. One is government to government, which tends to capture the headlines.
Yeah.
But also there is regional organizations like AU and ASEAN, but also people to people. And this
business to business.
Business to private sector, tourism. Now, as chair, this is one of our responsibilities. Most people focus on negotiation with the North. But in the process, we increase, you know that in the last 20 years or so, Africa's growth, development, including Uganda, has been with the Asian countries. And this is part of the South. If you look at the trade, Asia, the trading partner, look at source of FDIs, look at source of tourists, and source of concessional funding for infrastructure and all that.
Yeah.
So now, as chair, we will be coordinating that. And it's our duty to see that both Uganda and Africa continue to benefit, in other to grow the benefits from trade, from people to people, from the Asia-Africa. You know, we have FOCAC, we have got Asia, India, we have got Asia, South Korea, we have TICAD. So all these growth areas that bring investment, Uganda will now be our responsibility.
Okay.
And as we do that, we can actually benefit because our people understand and they do business and we encourage it. And so I think whether it's tourism or FDI, I mean foreign direct investment or trade, we can benefit this country because it will be Uganda that will be coordinating and championing this relationship and South-South cooperation.
Allow me take advantage of the wording, non-alignment and alignment. When it comes to trade, over the last 10 years or so, there has been the need to transition from exporting items that are, well, of low value,
to value added.
Yeah, to items that actually bring a little bit more money than the average cash crops and products, including paper products. When it comes to aligning ourselves to the global economy that has had major disruptions conditioned by events including Ukraine and Russia war, and then we had the COVID-19 pandemic and the untold disruption it brought to global trade. When you look at the available market within the aegis of NAM, should Uganda, or rather has Uganda already worked out some kind of strategic blueprint that encompasses trade, all aspects of commerce, that play well into the politics of diplomacy, so that when you are trading, country X and country B are able to give us the best possible options if we are, for example, to not push further trade with, say, the United States or the EU. Of course, we've seen the fact that we've been delisted from AGOA. That also is a new spanner in the works. Is there some strategic blueprint that we can also agree to as the average Ugandans and understand specifically where we push? I think this will first go to Mr. Walugembe. Has it been provided so that business persons know that we are going to push products that go to Sri Lanka? This is what they want most. This is how government is helping us in adding value to those products.
Okay, so before the NAM summit, there's been organized a trade and investment summit. And yes, and this will facilitate those kinds of trade linkages between countries. But what you also see, as Ambassador has mentioned, is that you're seeing more trade happening among these countries, which wasn't the case in the past. So if you look at Uganda's trade balance, say, with Southeast Asia, it's quite huge, and it's going to increase. If you look at the trade between African countries themselves, you're seeing that this is increasing. If you look, Uganda's export portfolio, we're exporting more to the region than to any other part of the world. So what NAM and additional fora like that offer us is an opportunity to trade more with ourselves. This issue of depending on the West is a very difficult proposition, as you can see, because, for instance, if you look at AGOA, they say, oh, Uganda, we are delisting Uganda from AGOA because of human rights abuses. So if it's a trade relationship needs to be divorced, in our view, from political considerations. Because a trader cannot influence the human rights direction in Uganda or whatever. So that's the challenge.
Neither do they influence legislation.
Yeah, so that's the challenge with trade with the West, because it comes with a lot of conditionalities. On one hand, they say everything but arms, then they put a lot of non-tariff barriers, or they start linking trade to all these other extraneous kinds of things. The advantage with the East is that trade is trade. So as Ugandans trade, say, with China, or with Vietnam, or with Thailand, or with Myanmar, or any of these countries, it's purely trade. At no point do these countries say, you know what, first do A, first do B, first do C. And I think as a country, especially I was talking about commercial diplomacy, I think Ambassador should, you know, be well versed about the objective. I think for me, if Uganda is to pursue this very critical, then it means we need to really focus on this region and on the African region in order to improve our trade balance and to diversify away from the West.
Okay.
Okay, now I just wanted to add one.
Very quickly, and then I was going to allow you to expound on this argument very exhaustively when we return festive season. Allow me to return to studio and continue with our conversation on the relevance of the Non-Aligned Movement Summit that is coming up in January next year. Before we went into the break, I had tasked the good Ambassador James Mugume to offer us some perspective in light of what John Walugembe, the Executive Director at the Federation for Small and Medium Enterprises, described as commercial diplomacy. The need to see trade as trade and do not tag any aspect of investment and cross-border trade to the politics and aspects of human rights, as we have seen from much of Western capitals. Ambassador, a perspective on that. Is it possible or feasible that we can trade with other countries who do not care completely about the politics of the day, including aspects like human rights, that Europe and the United States have consistently pushed as conditionalities for some of the trading arrangements that we have? What is the value and the net value, for that matter, in trading with other countries, and given the nature of global politics, not minding about any other aspects that could influence the quality of trade between countries, for that matter?
You see, actually, the principles of non-alignment from Bandung, sovereignty of states, non-interference, win-win, mutuality of benefits. Those are the principles of the non-aligned. And this is what the G77 non-aligned movement tried to infuse in the global negotiations, as opposed to Western countries that they infuse conditionalities. Now, because of that, you'll find that the US or Europe, they will, like AGOA, they will say, we will trade with you, but you must accept homosexuality as a right. You see? Now, interfering with the principle in NAM that we have diversity of cultures, we have diversity of values, and at the same time, actually, it's not that the NAM does not respect human rights, because NAM was and remains the driver of international peace and security and democracy, because the domination of one region by another is not democracy, although people mistake it. Now, take for example the LGBT rights. LGBT rights, they are well respected in the Western values, but not in the African culture and values. And contrary to what many people think now, LGBT rights are not universal rights. They are neither in the Declaration of Universal Rights in 1949, nor the decision of International Court of Justice, nor a UN resolution to make it universal. But they will say AGOA is pegged on LGBT rights. They will sanction somebody on LGBT rights. Where for NAM, the principles are very clear. So our trade with Asia, Latin America and the Caribbean are based on those principles of NAM. And that's why you are going to see more trade and investment. And now that Asian countries like India and China are shifting to be global economic powers, I think this will balance international trade. And for Uganda, our trade, for Africa, our trade with Asia, with Latin America, I don't know, recently we have heard about the BRICS. BRICS, which means Brazil, Russia, India, and China and South Africa, to try and free international trade from conditionalities, which are the principles of NAM. So NAM is very important in the trade, not only for Uganda, but for Africa as a region.
Okay, let me return to Mr. Walugembe. There have been efforts to free Africa trade of the many bottlenecks that are disadvantageous over years, and the Africa Free Trade Area dispensation pretty much offers that. I do not know at what point, if we were to do a progress track of what the trade is within the workings of the that free trade area arrangement, if you don't mind, take us through so that we might have an idea whether that could offer the kind of impetus to trade with others outside of Africa, but who are not within the mainstream partnership with Europe or the United States.
Okay, so the African free trade, continental free trade area is part of a broader vision by the African Union, which we call Agenda 2063.
Okay.
And what we want is to ensure that there's increased intra-Africa trade, there's increased prosperity. Through the FCFTA, it's estimated that at least 30 million Africans will be lifted out of poverty, absolute poverty, and another 63 million will be lifted out of moderate poverty. It is expected that through the African trade area, the continent will enjoy a combined GDP of about 3.5 trillion US dollars. Now, the FCFTA therefore has a lot of potential, and there have already been some early wins. We have something called the Guided Trade Initiative, where a few countries have been allowed to trade in a select number of products. These include Rwanda, these include Kenya, and a couple, Ghana, and a couple of others. So there's already some movement there. That said, we believe that the FCFTA, people there's a lot of talk and not a lot of action. And that's a challenge with the whole issues around regional integration in general. Because if you look at the African continent, it's the EAC that's the most developed in terms of intra-regional trade. But even within the EAC, you see a lot of competition between regional interests and national interests. So whereas countries are very quick to sign on to these regional agreements, the practice often is driven by national interests. So that's why you see a lot of countries resorting to non-tariff barriers. Kenya has used those very well. Countries like South Sudan are starting to copy. Tanzania uses them occasionally. I think it's Uganda that tends to have a very liberal trade policy in this regard. I think that is very much driven by the Pan-African ideals of the president and the government.
And they need to be all-inclusive.
Yes.
In order to create
if you
the
look,
impetus for transformation.
if you weigh the benefits, you see that overall, this regional integration project has led to Uganda exporting more within the region. So in fact, it's tended to be beneficial. Traditionally, regional integration tends to benefit the more developed economy. And that's why Kenya has always loved regional integration, because its assumption is they are simply getting access to this bigger market. But what happens also with regional integration is that these smaller countries also start to boost their capacities because it's competition. So as they boost their capacities and get niches, as you see that Uganda has really gotten a niche in agribusiness, has gotten certain value chains, and is out competing the Kenyans. If you look at dairy, look at poultry, look at sugar. So there are certain areas where Uganda clearly has a competitive advantage. So then you see all these NTBs come up. But I think overall, it's positive, because for Africa, our inter-Africa trade is about 17%. If you look at the EU, it's about 69%. If you look at Asia, it's about 49%. So we are not trading with each other. And in any case, if you look at that, if you examine what is being traded, you find that when Africans are trading amongst each other, they are more likely to deal in more value-added goods than when they are dealing with outsiders. When you are dealing with outsiders, you are basically exporting our commodities and raw materials. So it's a good thing for Africans to trade with each other. But we need to tackle issues of nationalism. We need to tackle issues of diversity of products. We are all doing the same thing. So if Kenya and Uganda are producing the same thing, that's where non-tariff barriers come in, because the Kenyan businesses will seek protection. But if we specialize and we say, okay, the Kenyans should forget sugar. They've tried, they failed. They should forget, these 10 products. Then Ugandans should pick whatever they need in another line from Kenya and so on. This kind of trade relationship can end up being very beneficial to all. Yes.
Ambassador.
Maybe on the African Free Continental Trade Area, where NAM is very important. I think you heard recently there was a meeting of the BRICS in South Africa. Now there are two areas for the African integration. One is infrastructure, and critical to integrating our trade. In our relationship with Asia, as you have seen, we've done a lot of infrastructure development. The other opportunity, which I think is coming on, as you see many of these industrial parks coming up in Uganda, is the transfer of more labor-intensive manufacturing into Africa. And this creates more jobs. So if you create more jobs and you have a bigger market, so we can negotiate even bigger, because a 1.3 billion people market, if it is integrated with infrastructure, even the Western countries will stop those conditionalities, because a market of 1.3 that is integrated, that is adding value to their products, you cannot ignore it.
In fact, that reminds me of a sentiment I had just over a few days ago, that the United States is shifting its intervention to the extent that now it's comfortable to go into infrastructure development projects, and like the Chinese have done, because they think the Chinese are getting a little bit too much headway on account of infrastructure, so they also need to copy that. But that's a discussion for another day. Allow me ask you, when it comes to the aspects that John Walugembe has spoken about, the need to be able to realign the trading architecture within the region so that we pursue where we best benefit, first among ourselves, but also with other traders, trading partners and countries. Being chair of the non-aligned movement and the G77, how does Uganda realign its priorities in order to use that advantage? What, if I were to ask the straight question, is what are the advantages of being chair of NAM and G77?
The advantages of being NAM and G77, as I said, there are two components. There is coordinating the the global south in the negotiations with the north. And that a whole range of issues, whether it's reform of the Security Council, it's climate change, and all that. But also within the developing countries themselves. It's South-South cooperation aspect. Mr. Walugembe was talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area. What I was saying is that our relationship with Asia and Latin America, if you see what the BRICS, is going to be more resources with less conditionality, more based on win-win situation for infrastructure, for market access. Now, what Uganda can play is to galvanize during our period of 3 years the global south to cooperate more in infrastructure development, in foreign direct investment, in trade. You've heard about using local currencies. This is a new aspect, even within Africa. Normally, we are restricted. You have to have a lot of dollars in order to do business. But we can use our own currencies. And if we do, that increases trade. Mr. Walugembe is in business. He knows that foreign exchange is very restricted because to earn it is very difficult. So this component of using our own local currencies, the African Free Trade you're trading, I think it's a Pan-African payment system.
Correct.
We are starting China and Brazil, India and South Africa, using their local currencies, denominating infrastructure loans in those currencies. And it's those that actually increase trade. So I think there is our role now as chairperson is to make sure that we grow these initiatives. So we give us, and in the process of helping the global south grow these initiatives, our business people will open their eyes. They will participate more and have more trade exhibition, participate in more trade exhibition, and also demonstrate that actually we have milk, sugar, and other value added, and we start putting value, for example, on our minerals, and getting, say, yuan or Indian rupee or Kenyan shilling funding to do infrastructure to facilitate trade.
Thank you for inadvertently putting the question to John Walugembe on where are the priority areas when it comes to the trade products and services. I'm told there will be an investment summit just before the main NAM summit. What are we prepared to pitch?
So I think as Uganda, we need to focus where we tend to thrive. And for us as a country at this point, it should be agro-processing. As a country, God has blessed us with good soils, good climate, even with the fact, given the fact that Ugandans use limited fertilizer and so on, we still grow
a lot of food.
So if we can commercialize this, if we can make sure that we add value, if we can package, if we can try to take advantage of the markets that we have access to, whether it's the ESC or Commerce, and try to compete fair and square. Because that's one thing Ugandans must understand. No one's going to give you a market on a silver platter. You have to compete. You have to give the customer a product that they like. See? So that for me should be the starting point. I talked about the issues around the service industry. Service industry, I talked about the meetings, incentives, conferences, and events. MICE. Let's host more events. This is free foreign exchange. Because if you already have the facilities and they have done that, but if you host more of these events, it means you keep getting in foreign exchange, you bring in tourists, you bring in foreign direct investors. Now, the other area that we need to look at also is ICT and issues around business process outsourcing. Ugandans are smart. They are very articulate when they speak English. So yes, that's we must say that. And everyone says that. So that's an advantage that we must leverage through issues around business process outsourcing and so on. Because we know we must ensure that our young people are able to benefit. Because if you look at some of this clerical work, telephone calls and stuff, this can be done here. And as countries like India, kind of go up, say in the ICT industry towards software development and so on, we can take on some of these work that they've been doing. So there are a lot of opportunities in different areas, but I would say agro-processing for me is key. The service industry is extremely important. There could be opportunities in the areas of infrastructure development. There could be opportunities in the areas of education. Uganda has been a net education exporter for a very long time. So we can continue leveraging this to see how do we ensure that we export our education services to other countries.
All right. Yes. As we begin to enter the final bend of the discussion, allow me just go back to 2007 when the iconic Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting was held. The anticipation to that event was something that we had never seen as a country. The aftermath is also something we had never seen as a country. I understand you were part of the organizing committee of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. Ahead of the non-aligned movement summit and the G77, you would excuse Ugandans who are bent on pessimism and looking at some of those aspects that are not good. For example, he spoke about the fact that some vendors are being abandoned off the roads. We see the potholes in the city, and we're being told within the next 2 months this will be, the sore eye will not happen. What does it take to put together a conference of this magnitude? What are the behind-the-scenes events, of course, away from the money, and what really happens after the curtains have been drawn? And then we ask ourselves the questions. It could be accountability. It could be to look at exactly what the dividends are and perhaps capitalize on that. Just take us through that world.
Behind the scene, I would imagine the organizing committee members are not sleeping.
Okay.
Because apart from, they have to have infrastructure, roads, conference facilities, at a standard that will have been, a global standard. So this is a big challenge. I can imagine there is a cabinet subcommittee, then there is particular subcommittees, so in infrastructure or services, hotel standards. So there is a lot of work, and many of those will be working around the clock. What we learned after that it is important where you do to make sure that you do your procurement procedures right.
Right.
Because you remember after Chogam we had a big fallout in terms of even people who, like Vice President Bukenya, he took a decision on quick making sure the cars are manufactured in time for Chogam. But later on he got in problems for that. So now the lesson is that you need to make sure that you follow the procedures. To involving the population. It's when we had a lot of publicity, media, and a lot of people, business people came in, and this idea of MICE, conference tourism, was well developed. Because you remember after that, after we had the AU summits, we had the ICC summits, and everywhere everybody wanted to come to Kampala. Now, after one of the things, after the women work, they work with now Uganda to coordinate NAM and the G77. And that's, again, outside what the Ugandans are saying. But the benefits will be there. As our business people participate in infrastructure, in benefits of regional integration. But if we are the leaders and coordinators, Uganda will have delivered its mandate. And it's a national pride to say that during our chairmanship, we achieved 1, 2, 3, 4. One of them, if we can have African Continental Free Trade Area and BRICS, and have the developed countries put money, transfer technology. What he was saying, for example, if we pick up an industry like beef industry, I have seen this clip. Basically, you can see that to compete where we have advantage in beef, we need high quality products. So the issue of traceability will be very important. So Uganda, I hope that we can pick examples, say in Southern Africa, Namibia, Botswana, how they are doing export of beef. And we use this period to make sure that we learn from our developing countries in order to meet this standard. Okay. Rather than have only the conference, so that people, Walugembe and his colleagues, can see particular benefit that when we were chairman of NAM, Ugandan private sector learned these lessons from Asia, from Africa, and from Latin America.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm afraid we're going to have to close this conversation. If we can, let's use 1 minute each to give what could be closing remarks and anything that the moderator might have skipped. John.
Okay, no, so I just want to encourage Ugandans to take advantage of the opportunities that NAM will present. At the same time, I want to encourage the local authorities, particularly in Kampala, to ensure that there is coexistence. Businesses are part and parcel of Kampala and are part and parcel of the package, and that's the only way in which we hope to benefit from NAM. If we push them off the street and then these people go back with their money, we will have defeated the purpose of NAM. So I'm just urging them to be more considerate as they make preparations. Thank you.
Ambassador?
My remark would be there's going to be prior to the conference business exhibitions.
Yes.
I want to encourage Ugandans to participate and see what NAM and G77 are about in terms of business, to follow up and understand that the trade figures now show that trade with Asia, trade within Africa is the way to go. And therefore seek business opportunities within the NAM and G77 group of countries.
All right, Ambassador James Mugume, many thanks for the perspective and making time to appear on Morning at 10 TV, and many thanks to you too, John Walugembe, the Executive Director of the Federation for Small and Medium Enterprises. I do hope that the conversation has emboldened your understanding of matters NAM, but most importantly of the trade and investment opportunities that will accrue as Uganda takes on the chair of these two very iconic blocks in a global geopolitical landscape. It's been a pleasure having you on behalf of the team. That is my colleague Priscilla, Regina Naloga, and indeed those that are behind the scenes ensuring that we have a smooth 2.5 hours Monday to Friday. Have yourselves a lovely day.